Arms warriors excel in applying bleeds, proccing different buffs, and executing damage at the end of fights in their rotation. I'm going to teach you it in a digestible and beginner-friendly format for Season 4 of Dragonflight, with no information overload whatsoever. For the stat priority, we are always going to want a higher eye level that we can get our hands on over the secondary stats that are on offer to us. However, this here is a general idea of the secondary stat priority you should be looking for. But again, getting a higher and higher eye level is always going to be top priority and will generally output more DPS when you get that. If you're not sure what talents to take, the builds I'm going to be showing you are these, with this on the left being for raiding and single target, and the build on the right for Mythic Plus and AoE. They do have separate rotations, and I will be going through both, including which one to take if you only want to be using one build for both as a beginner. Import strings for these are in the description, by the way, so you can put them straight into your game. Before we get into that rotation though, these are some of the important cooldowns and utilities we're going to be speaking about. Rallying Cry is a great party-wide defensive that you can use that is kind of a utility as well, giving your party and raid members extra health temporarily and therefore improving their survivability. Lastly, we have one of my favourite cooldowns, Avatar, where you transform into a Stone Colossus, dealing more damage for a short period of time. Regarding the utilities that we have Pummel. This is the warrior's interrupt, otherwise known as a kick, and is used to interrupt the enemy's spellcasting. If you are a beginner to WoW, then you may not be aware of this, but it's actually really, really important in fights. We're not just there to do damage, but we're also there to actually hinder the damage our enemy is doing, and making sure that you're interrupting their spellcasting can be make or break in a lot of situations, especially in Mythic Plus. We have Battle Shout, a party and raid-wide buff that we can apply to our allies for an entire hour. This is going to increase their attack power. And lastly, on the bottom, we have Hamstring, an attack we can use to slow down our target. There may be often instances where we're trying to stop an enemy from chasing someone or getting from A to B, and Hamstring is the way we're going to do it as an arms warrior. Now that we're in game, let's first have a look at the UI. You may see that my UI is very different visually to yours. That's because I custom made it with an add-on called ElvUI. If you'd like to get this UI, you can by joining my Patreon down in the description below. One other thing that is on the UI is this here. This is a weak aura. That's another add-on if you're not aware. And by the way, if you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Then join my Discord, because we're very beginner friendly. Obviously, I make these videos for beginners. That's the whole ethos of my channel. So if you do join the Discord, we can help you out with any other queries or questions or things you're struggling with as well. That's absolutely fine. So this is a weak aura by Luxfoss. You can import this in your game, and what it does is it's just got all of your resources, your cooldowns, and your buffs all in one central place for you to look at, so they're not all over the screen in different places. The main resource we use as a warrior is Rage, and if I approach the target dummies, you can see here I've now got 27 and 83 rage, and certain abilities are going to generate rage and some are going to be spending them. We also have down here, just on the right hand side, battle stance and defensive stance. We can swap between these. A defensive combat stance reduces all damage you take and all damage dealt. You can use this in times of great unrest and you think that you're going to die or take considerable amounts of damage. And battle stance is a balanced combat stance that increases critical strike chance of your abilities and reduces the duration of movement impairing effects. That's the main one you're going to be using to be doing more damage in most of the fights. We're going to be starting off with the single target priority. And what we're going to want to do when we actually go into battle is, of course, putting on our Battle Shout. That's the party and raid-wide buff I previously spoke about. But we're actually going to charge into battle here. We're only going to use this when we're really going into battle or going from mob to mob. Charge an enemy, dealing damage and rooting it, and that's going to generate some rage for you as well. The next thing we're going to do is use our cooldowns up front. We've got Thunderous Roar here, roaring explosively, dealing damage to enemies within 12 yards and causing them to bleed for an amount of damage over 16 seconds, and that generates some rage. So that's a big bleed cooldown. And then we've got Avatar, where we turn to a big avatar for 20 seconds, causing us to deal 20% increased damage. These are both on a 1.5 minute cooldown. They're going to be on the exact same cooldown. You can use them together. And then we have Colossus Smash. You can use this twice for every one of these, if that makes sense, because it's on 45 seconds. Smashes the enemy's armor, dealing physical damage and increasing damage you deal to them for 30% for 13 seconds. And therefore, we're going to put a bleed on them we're then going to actually increase the damage we do, and then we're going to actually increase the damage that the enemy takes from us. And that's the big 3 priorities, so that we can do as much damage as physically possible to the boss. Then we have one of our main attacks, and this is Mortal Strike. This is a rage spender, so using this is going to cost some rage, and it's a vicious strike that deals damage and reduces the effectiveness of healing on the target by 50% for 10 seconds. You can see it's on quite a short cooldown here. Do use this on cooldown. It's one of our top priority. We're then going to use Thunderclap. And as you can see, it's also got a short cooldown. Now, we're not going to use this on cooldown at this point in the rotation anyway. What we're really doing is, you can see this buff here on my weak aura. This is Rend, bleeding for X amount of damage over every 2.5 seconds. And you can see here that Thunderclap is actually going to put Rend on the target. That is actually from this talent here, Blood and Thunder. Thunderclap costs more rage and deals 10% increased damage. If you have Rend, Thunderclap affects 5 nearby targets with Rend. So if there's multiple mobs here, it will affect all of them. And when it says if you have Rend, that's because you can talent into it over here. So if you don't have this talent, then, you know, it won't actually do that. If you're wondering what that means by if you have Rend, that's what it means. It means if you've talented into it, which we have. So we're only going to use Thunderclap to make sure that we're keeping up the Rend on the target. Then we're going to use Whirlwind on cooldown pretty much. Technically, you should only be using it at this point in the rotation when you're in these Colossus Smash windows. Otherwise, it comes about here. But as a beginner, I think just using it on cooldown at this point, it's on 10-second cooldown. That is going to be fine while you're learning the rotation. It's not going to be much of a DPS loss. If you do want to do it perfectly, then literally just slot it in here and only use it here when you're in that Colossus Smash window. But if you're like, that's getting a bit too confusing, then just use it on cooldown at this point. That's absolutely fine as a beginner. Then we have Execute. Attempts to finish off a foe causing physical damage based on rage spent. Only used on enemies that have less than 35% health. If your foe survives, 10% of the rage spent is refunded. So TLDR, we can usually, oh, perfect timing. We can usually only use it on or lower than 35% health, but sometimes it'll proc. When it does, we can use that proc. So whenever you see it proc, and that'll be at any percentage of health, you can then use it at this point in the rotation anyway. And that's from this talent here, Sudden Death. Your attacks have a chance to make your next execute cost no rage, be usable on any target, regardless of their health percentage, and deal damage as if you spent 40 rage. What perfect timing that was for that to trigger. I didn't plan that. And then we have Overpower. Overpower the enemy, again on a 12-second recharge, dealing damage, can't be blocked, dodged, or parried, increases the damage of your next mortal strike by 30%, stacking twice. So we can use these Overpower charges, and you can see here, I've got 2 stacks of that buff, and that's going to increase the damage of our mortal strike. So we then use our mortal strike, increasing that damage there. Again, use your Overpower on cooldown pretty much, and you'll be using your Mortal Strike on cooldown anyway, remember, so you don't really have to think about this too much. If you've got nothing else to press at that point, use your Thunderclap on cooldown, and then use your Slam if there's nothing else to press. Slam is just a really basic ability. Let's just go over that again. So we're going to charge into battle, use our Thunderous Roar, putting that bleed up, increase the damage we're doing with Avatar, increase the damage taken from by the enemy with Colossus Smash, use Mortal Strike on cooldown, use Thunderclap to apply Rend, use your Whirlwind on cooldown, use Execute whenever it's available, use both charges of Overpower, and of course use those charges on Mortal Strike, which we're using on cooldown anyway, and then use Thunderclap if you don't really have anything else to press, and if you've got nothing else to press after that, it's going to be Slam. It's quite a straightforward rotation, as you can see here, but it's actually really, really, really fun. So we're just basically going down that priority list from left to right. And that is it for single target. We're then going to move on to the Mythic Plus and Area of Effect priority, and it is quite different. If you are a literal, absolute beginner and you think that learning 2 rotations is too much and you just want to be doing, whatever level content, and you're like, I just want to stick with 1 rotation for now, stick with this one. It's simpler than the AoE rotation. Some abilities, like Whirlwind, like your Thunderous Roar, etc., are going to be hitting multiple targets, and it will actually be cleaving. So although this is a single target rotation, some of your main abilities here will be actually hitting multiple targets anyway. So don't think that if you do want to just stay with this, that you're only going to be hitting one target completely. It will be doing some cleave damage, just not as much damage as if you went into the full AoE rotation. So if we go into the AoE rotation, you can see there is quite a lot of things changing. Well, a fair amount changing. So what we're going to do here is, well, one of our abilities has actually been traded in. Remember we had Colossus Smash, smashing their armor. That's now replaced with Warbreaker here, smashing the ground and shatter the armor of all enemies in 8 yards, not just one, but all of them, dealing damage to them and increasing damage you deal to them. So the same thing, but it's an AoE version. So we're going to use that Colossus Smash, or otherwise now known as Warbreaker, and then we're going to use our Whirlwind straight after. We're then going to use our Sweeping Strikes on cooldown. For 15 seconds, your single target damaging abilities will actually hit one additional target. So basically, our single target damage abilities are also going to hit multiple targets there. We can then use our Avatar and Thunderous Roar, and then use our Blade Storm. These are all on the same cooldown, so we can use them 1, 2, and 3. As you can see there, you're spinning around, becoming an unstoppable storm of destructive force, striking all nearby enemies, dealing reduced damage beyond 8 target. And again, we can just use those on cooldown. Then we're going to use our Overpower, just as before, using our Execute whenever we can, then using our Mortal Strike, and then using Thunderclap and Slam. And let me just take off Cleave because I'm not really using that. But that's pretty much it. So it is a bit different. Again, using Warbreaker and then Whirlwind, keep up Sweeping Strikes as much as possible, using your cooldowns, your Overpower, your Execute whenever you can, and your Mortal Strike, Thunderclap as well, spreading rend to all of those targets, and then your Slam. And that's pretty much it. That is it for the Mythic Plus rotation. So it is a fair bit different, but actually when you look at it, it is still quite straightforward. Now, if you are wondering about the set bonus for this season, it really doesn't do much. In Fury specialization, it does actually change quite a lot, but this season for Arms Warriors, it's really quite boring if I'm honest. So the 2 set bonus increases the critical strike damage and chance of your Mortal Strike here, and then the 4 set makes it so that critical strikes from your Mortal Strike, etc., actually will increase your damage and critical strike chance of everything. So it's really, really passive, doesn't really change anything, but good to know, of course, nevertheless. And that's it, guys. That's how you're going to play Arms Warrior in Season 4 of Dragonflight. Again, if you have any questions at all, then please do join our Discord. We're very, very beginner friendly over there. And if you would like some behind-the-scenes videos, if you would like my UI, and I've got a lot of other resources as well, then you can get those all on my Patreon, which of course also does support this channel. If you're looking for other specs, whether it's Protection, Fury Warrior, or any other classes, click this playlist here. It's got all of the Season 4 videos in there for you, so you are completely covered.